Hi, everybody. Before we get to another great interview, the Too Opinionated podcast could really use your help. And it's easy, it's free. IMDb, which is the entertainment database, imdb.com, named us a top 100 podcast. We came in at number 82. That's a big deal because there's 15 million podcasts and growing. So to be named to anybody's top 100 list, pretty big deal for us. And the way you can help is to go to imdb.com, look up the Too Opinionated podcast, and that's it. Just bringing our page up. That traffic really helps us out. Our YouTube channel is MeisterCon Pod. All we ask is that you subscribe. It's also free, but that really helps us to attract these amazing guests that we keep bringing on the program. And that's it. 2 easy ways for you to support us, and we would really appreciate the help. Now let's get to that interview. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Too Opinionated. I am so excited to welcome back one of our good friends, Douglas Vermeeren. So welcome, Doug.
Hey, awesome to be with you, as always.
I could have went through the spiel: writer, director, stunt person, producer. What I missed? I missed one. No, maybe that was it. Actor. I forgot actor.
Oh, yeah, I do that too, I guess.
You know, you're like a Swiss Army knife.
I guess, hey?
You know, I was telling you just a second ago, we're closing in on like 1,000 guests for the show, which is kind of a big deal. Well, the most that any one person has been on the show is 4 times. I've only done that one time. I've had one person been until today. So you're number 2. So now you're tied for the most appearances ever on the Too Opinions.
Well, now I have a goal to break that record. So there we go.
You have to. I think I need to do like Saturday Night Live. If you hit 5, you should get something. You know.
If you pause this interview and then call me back in 10 mintes, we'll call this one. Right? It's a
I'm going to start like a 5-timers club.
Nice.
But it'd just be you for the moment.
Great. Well, Club of One. That sounds like a good movie title.
Club of One. Well, and you'd have a chance to hang on to it for a while because the other person with 4 is an author. So it's every time he writes a book, he comes on the show. So you got a little bit of time.
So he better get a book together.
Yeah, he just came on. So he hasn't finished. You know, he's going to take him a while to write.
So he's still trying to figure out what to write about next, I guess.
Right. So you got a little bit of time. You could build up your lead.
That's awesome.
No, Doug, this is always a pleasure when you come on the show, and I'm excited to talk with you today. We're talking about the science of getting rich, and this is a documentary that's kind of interesting because if I remember right, it's based on a book that was already turned into something 15 years ago or so. And now you're making it into kind of basing it into a documentary. But talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, the reality is the book was written way back in 1910, and it's considered the foundational book of pretty much all the big personal development books like Think and Grow Rich and all of these other ones. Even Rich Dad Poor Dad can be traced to this.
Yeah.
But the thing that it's most recently known for, if we're talking 15 years ago, was the book and movie The Secret.
That's right.
And that's what Rhonda Byrne received. And then she was inspired by that to put out this Secret documentary. Now, the thing that's interesting about ours is I actually brought many of the people from The Secret into this movie too.
I love that.
So that they can kind of share how they fit with it. And it's really quite fun. And we've had a good time making it.
It's because it's based on that book that was written over 100 years ago.
Right.
Hasn't that gotten outdated by now?
Well, this is actually one of the other things why I decided to do the documentary, because when you're reading the book, yeah, the language is a bit dated. It's 100 years ago. We don't talk exactly like that anymore. It's like reading the Bible. It's a little archaic in the language, but the principles are still true. And so what I decided to do when it's funny because people ask me, first of all, how did you choose the guests that you have in the film? And I suppose I could have said, who's read the book? Raise your hand. Okay, you'll do. And I decided not to do that. Instead of what I want to do is see who was living the book, right? And so in the contemporary setting that we live in, which now, what are we? We're almost 2025, right? Like it's just around the corner. So who's taken this 100-year-old book and has done the principles enough that I could point to their lives and say they understand this material? And so that's kind of, I think, the benefit of doing that is we're not looking at it through the 100-year lens anymore. We're looking at, do these principles still hold true, and how do they work today, right? And how can a regular person make them work?
I love that. And what a visionary from that original author to come up with principles that actually have staying power. I mean, that last. I mean, it's not too surprising because we talk about ancient philosophers that we're still going with some of the things we're coming up with. So 100 years in that context, not that long.
Yeah, and you know what? I often have wondered that. Like, I mean, there's a lot of books and materials that have been around centuries, literally. Yeah. And how do these guys have the intuition to understand that these are timeless principles? And I wonder, you know, if we really examine that, I think that it's a testament to how similar we are as people.
Yeah.
Right? Like, as human beings, the human experience that was 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago is still similar to what we're experiencing today. We all encounter the same kinds of challenges or self-doubt or ambitions or aspirations that we have. And you know, it's funny that even if you read some of these books, they talk about some of the day-to-day, everything from, hate to say it, but problems with the in-laws to the boss at work to getting yourself motivated to wake up on time. Like, there's remnants of that in all of these materials till the back end of time, right? And so I think it's kind of an interesting thing to show. And if you look at so many of those books and materials, the principles are really interwoven, and there's a lot of things that overlap, but they're different perspectives. So I'm not saying that it's redundant, because it's not, right? Like, people aren't plagiarizing each other's materials since the beginning of time. What it is different perspectives on really the same kind of ideas. And even as I made this film, it was interesting because obviously I'd read the book many times in preparation to plan the film. I'd even read it prior to, before I had thought I was going to do the film.
I was going to ask you, had you read it, and that's what sparked the inspiration? You know, how did you come up with that?
Yeah, and I mean, that's a great question too. I think for me, you know, the first time I read it, I thought this was great material, and I tried to apply it. The second time I read it, I was like, wow, I guess I missed some things the first time I read it, and some of the stuff that I read and tried worked, right? And so that's a big plus. And then, of course, as I began to get into this idea of maybe doing something with the movie, I recognized a lot of hidden gems that I had not seen at all, even in the previous readings. And I think I've probably read it maybe a good 40 or 50 times now, which isn't super hard. Like, don't be impressed, people, by that, because it's really not a big book. It's relatively thin. But and it's got 17 chapters, and each chapter, if you're lucky, is maybe 3 pages. And so the reality is I think it was just that the book is so, like, jam-packed tight of no nonsense. Whereas I hate to say it, a lot of books today, you know, we've got 80%, the 80-20 rule is definitely true. There's 20% great stuff, 80% fluff. I think that the science of getting rich is, you know, like 90% really great material. And then there's 10% where they kind of elaborate on the great material. So it's all really quite well done, right?
Yeah, it makes for a quick read.
Yeah, you don't need to have, like, even if you look at the book, The Strangest Secret, or James Allen, As a Man Thinketh, and things like this, they're not long books, but they're jam-packed, overflowing with important things to say. And man, I wish some of the authors today would get the idea that that's how a book really should be written.
I always laugh about, I'm a big Tolkien fan, but I laugh about his writing because he was so descriptive. And I mean, you talk about fluff. You could cut those books in half if he'd take out just, you know, a couple hundred pages of describing the scenery.
Right. Well, we had some jokes growing up about Tolkien that, you know, you could either choose the phone book, or you could pick one of his Lord of the Ring books and use it as a booster seat, right? Like, that would be what you sit on to, right? And if you're really a short kid, you get 2 of them, right? So
that's hilarious.
Yeah. But I mean, great stories, great books. I think there's a lot of really good things, but obviously there's a difference between fiction and nonfiction as well. And I think that, you know, one of the things that we're looking at Tolkien and some of these books, or like a C.S. Lewis or things like that, there's a lot of these guys that weave really, really important principles around fiction, and they do so well with it. But we also then see that there's people that just spit out those principles and here you go. Right. And so I think Science of Getting Rich is like we're going straight to the meat. this is what these principles are, and I don't need to tell you a fluffy story to get it.
Well, so
Right?
so give me an example. What's one of the principles that you kind of discuss in the movie or in the documentary?
Well, there's actually quite a few, and there's so many that have made a personal difference to me.
Yeah.
I guess one of the principles that I really liked in there is the importance of learning how to be a creator rather than a competitor. And I think a lot of people now, when I'm talking about competition, I'm not just talking about me competing with other people, because I think that that's a shallow view of competition. The reality is you are often your biggest competitor, and you create things to put as stumbling blocks in your way. So, for example, we hear people say, like, if I'm saying, well, if you want to get to prosperity and abundance, why isn't it happening for you? And I'll have people who'll give me a million excuses. They'll say, well, the marketplace is not good. The timing's not good. I don't have the skills that I need. I don't have the knowledge that I need. I don't have the connections that I need. I don't have any money to start with. And I don't, right? And they come up with this list of things that they put as competition to their ability to get to move forward, right? And let's be honest, excuses have never created anything in the world,
exactly
right? It's totally true. In fact, something funny, and maybe I'll even leave this as a note for your listeners. So I created a program recently to go out with the Science of Getting Rich called the Millionaire Mind Stretch, because I believe mindset means you're staying put. Stretch means you're going further. And in that program, I decided to just make a list of all the excuses that I've ever heard from people about why they don't get to the success that they need. Now, some of these are pretty funny. Like, no kidding, I had one lady say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I have a hair appointment that day. Like, and that kept her from doing some really big things in her life. I have another person, like the excuse they gave me, he said, what was it? Something to the effect of that he had forgotten his toothbrush at home, so therefore he wasn't comfortable going to meet people because he was worried about his breath. Well, dude, stop at a CVS on the way, buy a pack of gum, and call it a day. Like,
I was going to say, that's an easy one.
Oh my gosh, there's solutions for everything. But the ridiculous excuses that I heard, I literally was able to make an excuse list that is literally 10 to 20 pages long. And so one of the ways that I use that list out with my students, I say, now, when you're faced with a brilliant opportunity, something that you really know you should do, and in your heart, you already know it's going to make a difference, and you've got an excuse, do this. Go look on that list, and if it's there, get to work and forget about it. Don't worry, like, you can see what you're doing, right? And so that idea in the movie and in the book of competition stopping us is a big one. Whereas what we should be looking for is creativity, right?
That's right.
Because the reality is every problem that comes to us in life is not a problem, it's a puzzle. And the way that we solve puzzles is we outthink them or simply work through them. And I love, there's a quote that Albert Einstein gave years ago that many of us have heard. It said that no problem is solved at the same level of thinking that was used to create it. And so we've got to evolve our thinking to get past that problem. But here's the other thing that Albert Einstein could have added, is that we also don't have to solve those problems by ourselves. So a lot of time, this idea of creativity, we think if it's meant to be, it's up to me. Well, I think that's a good beginning, but there's a lot of things in life that, if you go beyond you can get them done.
Right.
And if you look at all the major accomplishments, like if you look at the Academy Awards or the Oscars or the guy that climbed Mount Everest or the person that won an Olympic gold medal, those are the guys that are accepting the award, but they generally have created it as a team. They've had a support group that's helped them get that. Like if you just take movies, for example, the guy that gets the Oscar, he didn't write the script. He didn't shoot the film. He didn't edit it or score it. He didn't do the costumes or the makeup. Like, we could go on forever and ever. So if you want to be successful, you've got to understand that if it's meant to be, it starts with me, but I better get a team quick to be able to help me get to that higher level. Because you only know so much.
That's right.
On your own, you have limitations.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because all of us run into that kind of the limits of our abilities at some point. And you can learning and training and fix some of that, but at some point you're gonna hit kind of that ceiling. And if you don't bring in outside help that can show you new ideas and new ways to do things, all that, then you can get stuck. I think that's a good point. And a lot of people, they have trouble with that one because they want to.
What's interesting about that, when I was doing the studies on this, not only for this movie, but also for that millionaire program that I've created,
Yeah.
I did some research on entrepreneurs specifically, and I did some look into the reporting that the IRS has done, and as far as like home-based or self-made businesses, people that are self-employed, and they were saying that the bulk of those people get to about $200,000, and then they can't go past that.
Right.
And the hypothesis is that they've done everything they know how by themselves, right? And then it was funny, there was a big gap between that 200,000 and people that were getting to $1 million. And there was a very small percentage of started businesses or home-based businesses, whatever, that could get to $1 million.
Yeah.
And we began to kind of look at some of the research there, and we found that the big difference is just these people are do-it-yourselfers. These people are, let's ask questions from people who've done it before. Let's get advice from people who can help us. And I know that sounds like a little thing, but I honestly believe, based on my understanding of it, is that this group here sometimes is just too proud to ask. They don't want to admit they don't know.
I think that's a lot of the issue.
Right? They don't want to admit they don't know. And because it's their business that they started, they figure, I've got to solve all these problems by myself, and I've got to do all these things. It's up to me again, remember? And that's what I believe, that whole saying that says, if it's meant to be, it's up to me. It is to a beginning, but there comes a point that you need to then swallow your pride, and you need to expand your ability to solve problems beyond yourself to include people who have a different and fresher perspective than you do, right? We all need mentors. In fact, there's a quote that I heard once that was attributed to Oprah Winfrey. And however anybody feels about her is irrelevant, but the quote is something to the effect where it says that a mentor is a person who sees things about you that you don't yet realize. Wow.
I like that. Yeah.
Right.
And that's true.
Yeah. Oh, totally true. Right.
You know, I watch, I've told you before, my wife works for Live Nation, and I've watched her mentor other people, and it's usually her that is the instigator,
right?
Because she recognizes something that she's able to help somebody with. They don't even know that they need that help, and then she can kind of mentor them on that.
Here's a funny saying that I tell my students. So many of us spend so long looking in the mirror that we don't see the kick me sign on our back. Right? Isn't that true?
Yeah, that's totally true.
Because we only want to see our positive qualities and how we look. We don't ever want to look at our deficiencies or where we're not doing things smart, or and to be bold, even sometimes where we're acting like an idiot, right? And not because we're doing that intentionally. It's because we just don't know what we don't know.
Well, it's difficult. I think all of us have that little bit of trouble lowering our guard so that we're not defensive, because, this is your baby. You've worked so hard on it, and you've hit this ceiling, but you could ask for help, or maybe somebody could offer help, but you have to actually accept it, and that's hard.
Well, you don't ever want anybody telling you you've got an ugly baby. It's hard to accept that, right? Yeah. Here's the other thing that's interesting too. If I go back to this idea of competition, right, and people making excuses for themselves, right? So if you're listening, write this down. The size of your success is determined by the size of your butt. Now, what do I mean by that? I don't mean the butt that you're sitting on. I mean, you get to something and say, I can't do it, but, right? I could do it, but, I could try it, but. The minute you have a big butt, I know this sounds funny, it's the minute that your success or ability to be successful diminishes. Right?
Well, that's a really good quote, and it fits for everything, not just trying to make money. I mean, something as simple as just starting, like if you're getting ready to start a fitness journey. Right. A lot of people try to lose weight or something, and every obstacle, every excuse that you can come up with, I guarantee will be in your way at some point. And it's just a matter of how you get around those is going to determine whether or not you're successful losing weight. And it's the same with everything.
Well, I agree with you. And I think a good way to say it is, if you've never done it before, you're going to encounter friction. Right. And that anytime you encounter that friction is an opportunity for excuses or buts or justification or comparison or competition, like we say, or any of these things, to put yourself out of the game. And the minute that you put yourself out of the game, the reason why you did that doesn't really matter. You're still out of the game.
Yeah.
Right? Why you're sitting on the bench is irrelevant. right?
You're on the bench.
And that's it, right? Like the world you can either be a spectator or a participant. You can't be both.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the other thing that's really important is, when a person has a strong enough reason why, when you find your why power, you will get your willpower. And until you have a proper reason why, or something that motivates you enough, the first hard thing that comes along, you're going to say, this isn't fun anymore. It's not easy. Well, guess what? Success is not meant to be fun on the way there. It's meant to be rewarding, right? And I think that there's a big difference between fun and joy, right? Joy, to get to joy, sometimes you got to do stuff that you haven't done before. Sometimes you got to face your fears. Sometimes you got to do what's hard. Sometimes you got to make sacrifices. But for fun stuff, we can all play now and pay later, and most of us do.
Yeah.
Right?
You were dropping some really good quotes on here. I'm assuming the movie, the documentary, is going to go through some of these things.
Right. In fact, that's exactly right. Like, I'm not sure if you knew this, but this is my 5th personal development documentary. I know.
I knew you had done more than one.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize it was 5. That's quite a few.
Right. And I know that, like, you've had me on quite a few times kindly for like acting and the producing and the mainstream movies I've done. And I love doing those. And by the way, all these principles have helped me become the actor that I am. But what's funny is for the longest time, I also have been a speaker on stages. I've done lots of TEDx talks, and I've shared the stage with guys like Tony Robbins and all the gang from The Secret, and most of them are in these movies. And so I think that this is a philosophy that I genuinely live, and that's what's allowed me to do all the other things that I do too. So I firmly believe this stuff, and I firmly think that a lot of my belief comes because I've seen these principles in action. And it's not just about being an actor. Like if you look at, even, some of the top actors, like I love Stallone is giving these motivational speeches in every Rocky movie. And I don't think it's artificial. I think that that's genuinely who he is. And that's why it comes across as, like, I believe his spirit within him is Rocky. Right? Like he's the underdog who's
it's better thinking of him that way, I think. I like it.
I agree.
Because that makes me, I don't know, it makes him larger than life a little bit.
Right. And I believe that guy is an example of somebody who's literally had to fight for everything that he's gotten. And if you look at his biggest movies, well, I think arguably it's going to be the Rocky and Rambo franchises. His other films, they've been okay. Tulsa the King's great. But a lot of his other films have never really made the impact. Right. So he's always had to fight to prove himself, which I think has been a really positive force in his life. But when he's proven himself, look at the characters he's created. Like Rocky is undeniably one of the biggest legacies and legends of cinema of all time, but it's inspired more people. And I don't know about you, but I've done more workouts to Eye of the Tiger than probably any other song in the history of my playlist.
I agree with that 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's a reason these principles work for us.
I've also worked out to the Rocky theme, though. I have worked out.
I have too. Right. But I think that this is also, whether it's these stories or our own personal story, the one we're creating right now, we all want to be that hero, and we all need that inspiration, and we need the reminders of what we're capable of. And I think actually that is a great message in the movie, The Science of Getting Rich, and the book. See, most people think it's about money because they focus on that word rich.
Right.
But they really don't understand what that word means. So one of my friends who's in the movie, by the way, he was also in The Secret, is a fellow by the name of John Demartini. Mm-hmm. And John says, I love this quote. He says, "We are all wealthy. It just appears in the form that we value most." So for some people, that is going to be cash, right? For other people, maybe it's your relationships. Maybe it's your physical health. Maybe it's your connection to spirituality or yourself or whatever.
Yeah.
You get to decide what that word rich means. But I think it's a shallow mind that quickly dismisses it as a bank account. That could be part of it. Right. It could be part of it. But I'm a firm believer that everything expands, first of all, from the outside or the inside out. And so if you want to have the bank account and the things on the inside, you can't do it unless your inside is developed. In fact, I love what Jim Rohn, who is a big motivational speaker, also said. Yeah. He said, if you win the lottery and you want to keep it, you have to learn how to become a millionaire quickly. Isn't that interesting? Right?
That's so true. That's so true, because
Right?
you hear of so many people that suddenly have money and they don't have a clue what to do with it. And some of them,
Right.
it only leads to bad things.
Well, the other thing too is many people who win that money, if they've got no experience with money, they go on a mission to spend it, and soon they have nothing. But if you look at real wealthy people, when they acquire money, they actually don't rush to spend it. They actually have already a significant element of balance in their life, where their self-worth is not based on their net worth, right?
Right.
So they can calmly understand that, okay, I've got some money, but it doesn't fundamentally change who I am. Right? I can make decisions based on the wealthy individual that I am, with or without money. And therefore, because I am already whole, I get to keep more of that money because I don't need to spend it in order to buy it. And it's funny because when I was doing the movie The Science of Getting Rich, obviously I'm observing people wherever I go to get lessons that might be good for this movie. And I noticed that some of the people that I interviewed or met or had studied, a lot of their self-worth came from just going to the mall and buying something to get that adrenaline rush so that they could feel good about having possessions. And in fact, when I did the studies of the 400 millionaires that was used to create that Millionaire Mind Stretch program, I wanted to see what were the common markers or things that the millionaires did that allowed them to accumulate wealth, but more importantly, keep it. Right. And I noticed that this idea of understanding what their future looks like and having a balanced view of their present were really keys. Right. You know, if you have people who, one day, if I get this money or if I have this, everything will be great. Well, they never can accumulate because they're always looking too far up here. And then people who are here who, you know, only just kind of look at here and, oh, woe is me. My situation today sucks. I don't have enough money and I got to get help, blah, blah, blah. Right? They give away their power because they're too focused here. Right? But if they have both and they know that the one can connect to the other, there's a saying that I like, a Chinese saying. It said, if you would know your past, look at your current situation. Right? Your past tells who you are. But if you would see your future, look at your current decisions. Right? So again, if you know your past, if you would know your past, look at where you are now. If you want to know your future, look back to now, your current decisions. So you really need that future to determine what you're going to do in the present, right? And the crazy thing about the word now that I think is just really powerful. If you take it N-O-W, you've probably seen that little poster with the kitty cat on it, and they spell now backwards. It says, if you do it now, you've won. Right? Whatever, right? Sounds great. But I'm a firm believer that if you take those letters N-O-W and instead of reversing them, just stack them. And N-O-W stands for no other way, right? So if you're looking at where things are really going to change, the most important position is now. And if you, in them now, start looking towards the future, saying this is who I want to be and why, again, back to that idea, having a why, you suddenly have more power. Most people, they don't realize that they're in the now. They don't realize that they're in the past, or they don't know where they're in the future. They just don't know where they are. Instead, they're sitting on the couch watching Netflix. And they're giving away their now to live someone else's fantasy by watching someone else do something great, right? So why don't we just do it for ourselves, right? Make a decision today that you're going to be different in the future and then do the hard work.
Yeah, I love that. Because it is, you know, a lot of times, I always go by the philosophy that you should expect to run into obstacles, to situations that seem kind of hopeless, to difficulties, problems, people that are an issue. You should expect all of that. The key is to keep moving forward.
100%.
It's fine to run into that stuff. But if you keep moving forward, even if it's just little steps,
right?
And don't let little setbacks or big setbacks just finish you. It's okay if you need to take a day to recover. That's okay. But the next day you need to get back at it.
And you know what? When an athlete, for example, does a big football game or something like that, they take a day after. They take a day, right? Okay. But here's the interesting thing is I don't know about looking at a situation and saying it's hopeless, because I think sometimes we trick ourselves and we paralyze, and then we say, it must be impossible. I'll never get it.
That's right. That was kind of my point. We look at something that's hopeless and we let it beat us, when if we really, if you just if you break it into parts, you can usually little by little get around that.
Right. In fact, what is it they say? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Just don't start with the butthole.
That's right.
Right? That's the truth.
That is the truth. Yeah.
There's a saying in education that everything is learned in what they call the J curve. And this might show up backwards on your screen, but if those of you that are watching, bear with me. I'm doing the letter J. Okay. So the letter J. Okay. The reality is when we start, we don't really know what we're in for. So often we are pretty optimistic. But as we try a little bit, we're like, oh, shoot. Like we're trying to ride our bike for the very first time as a kid. We're going to wibble and we're going to wobble and we will crash and fall down a bunch of times. But if we keep going and trying, it's gonna be difficult and it might even feel hopeless at points. But if you stop here, you're never going to get it.
Right.
But if you continue and you go, suddenly you're going to actually hit a point where you start becoming exponentially efficient. And you've figured some things out and it gets easier and you've gotten past the hump and all of a sudden you're really excellent. And then you go from someone who couldn't ride a bike to all the way you're going no hands and you've got somebody on the back while you're doubling them and all these other things, right? And so I think that's just it. We've got to understand that there will be a limited time where it will be difficult to do that. And if we can set a goal to just say, okay, I don't know how many hours or days it's going to be, but it's not going to be forever.
Right.
Right. And so if I can even try this for another day, give it one more try, I'm that much closer, not much closer. There's a really good story in the book, Think and Grow Rich, about a guy who was looking for a gold mine, and he literally stopped 3 feet from reaching the gold. The story is called 3 Feet from Gold, and there's also another book by two of my friends called 3 Feet from Gold. But I think in life, many of us stop just before the victory.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, right? We get excited, we give it a try, and then we're like, it's probably too tough to do anyways. Maybe I was wrong to even try.
Yeah.
And then we do nothing.
Yeah, I think that we've all done that, but I think that's the majority of why we don't accomplish more, or people that you see that you think are successful, they didn't just fall into it.
Right.
I mean, maybe a few of them, but the majority of us have to work at it. They just stuck it out.
It's funny that you say that.
Experts at it.
Right? Because as I've done my interviews with the top achievers, I had interviewed even people who were gifted money or were born into families of wealth and everything else. And it's true, you can get a gift, but what you do with the gift also matters. So I've met people that, no kidding, started really successful because of what they were given, and they didn't do anything, and suddenly they had nothing. It can go just as quick in today's society. What do they say? Wealth always travels from those who value it least to those who value it most.
Oh, I like
so
that.
If you've got it, wealth will travel. If you don't value it, it'll go to the guy that does. Right?
I really like that.
It's totally true. And by the way, this is all wisdom that we are sharing in the Science of Getting Rich movie or in my Millionaire Mind Stretch program. So if you like these ideas that you're hearing about wealth, come visit us with this stuff. And if you're like me, what happened to me is I was a broke kid. No kidding. I was in debt right out of college, like probably everybody. And I never fully recovered in the beginning until I learned this. I had unpaid tax debt. I had 2 vehicles that the government decided they needed to pay my tax debt more than I needed to drive them. Right? I had eviction notices. I had power cut off and all this stuff. But as soon as I started learning these ideas, one little idea can change your entire life. And you'll never see the world again the same way. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this example, if you're listening to this, and I encourage you, if you have not heard this example, do this with me. Quickly pause this interview, open up a new window, and get the FedEx logo in front of you. Okay, the logo from FedEx. Okay, now that you've done that, start this again. I want you to look at the logo for a minute, and I want you to look for the arrow. Do you see the arrow? And most people are going to be like, there's no arrow in the FedEx logo. And I'll say, oh, yes, there is. Look between the E and the X, and you'll see that there is an arrow that points, right? Now, here's the crazy thing about that. Now that you've seen that, you'll never be able to look at that logo again without seeing it every single time. And you're also going to tell everybody you know that doesn't know this, look for the arrow, right? Now, I want to say that that's the same as these principles, whether it's building wealth or accomplishing your goals or getting to the next level in your life. You will encounter single ideas that will make all the difference. Something that when it happens, a light just goes on and that light will never go out again because you now see things that you never saw before. And sometimes all it takes is one or two good ideas and your whole entire life could change its trajectory. So I'm going to suggest that a movie like this, The Science of Getting Rich, this is why I make these things. Because I'm a learner, I'm a student, I'm looking for those aha moments. And when I find them, wow, what a privilege it is to share them, to see them affect the lives of other people. So if this kind of stuff does interest you, come see the movie, come check out our program for this, and then get some results, just like others have done before you. It's a life-changing thing, right?
I love that. Well, you know, I've told you before my story. You know, I worked in call centers for 20 years and never liked it. You know, and started this podcast with my son just as something to do together, and it took off. Completely changed my life. You know, I was able to retire from the other work. Now I do something that I love to do. I get so much joy out of it, and it's replaced, you know, an actual 9-to-5 job. I mean, I never would have thought that. But if I hadn't taken the step to at least try it, I'd still be working in call centers.
Well, you know something that's interesting about what you just said? If we go back to that definition of rich, most of us never find that idea of rich in our life, whether, you know, abundance, prosperity, fulfillment, whatever it is, fill in the blank. The reason why is because we're too busy working at someone else's dream to discover our own. Right? And I think that that's it. There's a quote that I saw from John D. Rockefeller one time. I thought it was quite funny. He says, most people are working too hard to become rich. They're working too hard to ever become rich. And I think that's it. If you've got your head down and you're focused on it again on someone else's mission, you never really can take that breath of fresh air to say, well, what is mine? And I don't know, maybe you've had this experience. I've had it more than once where I've been in the shower just relaxed with nothing that I'm required to think about. And at that moment, inspiration hits me. This is what I should be doing. This is who I am. Or if I'm, you know, from time to time sitting on a beach or something with no other accountability or responsibility. This is why I believe that you do need to take a bit of downtime from time to time to just let your soul figure out where you are. Right? And where you need to be. It kind of reminds me of that saying that says, you know, from a bow and arrow, it says if a bow is constantly strung, eventually it loses its spring because the bow itself will just, that's why archers used to always unstring their bow when they'd store it. Right? We need to do that too with life. So in life, rather than us being worked up and worked like crazy and workaholic and work, take a breath, unstring your bow, let it sit, and think about, what do I really need to do? What would give me fulfillment? And you'd be surprised the answers you'd find.
Yeah, what a terrific documentary movie. I'm thrilled that you did that because it doesn't just sound interesting. It actually sounds like it could help people. Absolutely, and that was the goal. The reality is like I said, I've done 5 of these movies thus far. This is the 5th one. So each one of them has had a little bit of a different message to it. The first one I did was called The Opus, and we had like the people who did Chicken Soup for the Soul in it and many of the other really big people. But that one, the theme on it was, how do you go from a vision of what you want to turn it into a workable plan and then ultimately free-flowing performance in your life? Right. And that was a really interesting film. The second film I did was called The Gratitude Experiment. And we had a lot of really cool people like John Gray, who did Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. He's in it, and a few of the other big speakers from The Secret stuff. And we tried to find out, does gratitude really make a difference? Everybody talks about being grateful. Okay, so how and why? And if it does make a difference, how can I dial into that? And that was really an interesting adventure. I bet that was.
It was quite fun. And I learned a lot myself personally. It was so impressive. And the third movie I did was called The Treasure Map. And the treasure starts here. So how do you use this to create this intriguing future? And also including wealth, right? Like financial prosperity. And then the fourth movie that I did came out at the beginning of the pandemic. And it was so weird how the universe basically put us all in this situation where, quite frankly, we were in trouble. right? There was fear. Is this thing going to wipe out the human race? Can I even go to the Walmart without somebody coughing on me and maybe I'll die, right? Like, or remember when everybody's running out of toilet paper and all the things, like no one could work. How will we pay our bills? And so I put out this movie, How Thoughts Become Things. And in it, we talk about how to overcome fears and how to control our environment around us by the thoughts that we have.
Yeah,
and awesome. It became one of the top selling personal development movies of all time. But I believe that was because it was giving the most service when we all needed it most. Right. It was funny. The pandemic started in March, and I just finished the movie at the beginning of March. And then it came out in April, just as everybody was getting locked down. So it was crazy. And I believe the universe helped that. Yeah. And then, of course, this one is called The Science of Getting Rich. And I think it's coming at a time that's also very relevant. If you think about it, our economy is having all kinds of challenges. We've just changed leadership, or we're about to presidentially. And so there's going to be some new changes and some new things that happen. And so we're ready for a change. And I think a lot of people are personally ready for a change, whether it's their own finances or what their values and priorities are and so forth. And I've also got another one that I'm starting work on right now that will come out shortly. I don't mind talking about it a little bit because I think it's probably, in my opinion, just as valuable and timely as all the other messages that we've shared in these movies before. And I'm actually hoping and thinking that this one might even be the strongest, most relevant movie ever made, like by me.
Oh, really? Okay.
And it's called The Lost Message. Well, what's the message that's being lost?
Yeah.
Well, the reality is, let me maybe frame it this way, is there's one thing that's going to allow us to be the very best that we can ever be as people, as families, as husbands, as wives, as brothers, sisters. There's one thing that's going to help us all become better. And that's authenticity and being true to who we really know that we are. Yeah. Because right now, I think our society, too often we get the cues on what's correct or what's right, or are we liked and loved based on how many likes or subscribes we get,
right?
Or how people in the marketplace tell us we ought to behave or think or see, or other people giving us rules and regulations based on morality and ethics.
Right.
Well, the reality is in our heart, we already know a lot of these truths, but we sacrifice who we should be because we don't trust that anymore. We would rather get validation from an outside source. And so if we can return to our dreams, we will find our dreams. And the problem is, I don't think people are spending enough time contemplating here. We live a life of scrolling now. And that means that we're really, how should we say, subscribing to the values of other people rather than asking important questions to ourselves.
Oh, I really like that, Doug.
We are the lost message. We're it. We're the lost ones. Yeah. So that's the next movie, and we've already begun pre-production on that, and that'll be coming out in about 1.5 years or so.
That's amazing. Yeah. What a great idea. Where do the ideas come from with you?
I don't know. I don't know. Honestly, if I'm answering sincerely, I know it, like you and I were joking the other day that it does seem like I'm always so busy working on other movies for other people. And it's so funny because people say, Doug, you have this like kind heart about you, but I'm playing the villain in so many movies. And I'm like, right? It's just like, and you even know about one of the other movies we have coming up. It's got very questionable kind of aggressive content to it,
right?
Like of a weird nature.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Right. And so it's how do I say this? I really, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm maybe too deep of a thinker, but I'm not looking for me personally. I'm honestly looking at how can I help other people?
Yeah.
And what is it that I see, even like my own family? Like, what are my sons missing? What are my brothers missing? What is it that, others are lacking that I could somehow maybe help them see something? Or what am I missing that I need to find? And that starts the question. As I find an answer, I'm like, oh, I can share that because that made a difference for me.
I love that you're motivated by helping other people. Like when something works for you, you don't keep it. You share it with everybody.
But that's the best way to have it work in your life. You see, what do they say? The best way to learn something is to teach it to someone.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true.
Yeah. And I also think that the reality is if I just learn something and I hold on to it, I'm not really giving the universe an opportunity to give me something more. So it's funny. I had a chance one time. I was at a speaking event. Funny enough, this was one with Tony Robbins there, but the person that influenced me that day most was Deepak Chopra. So I went backstage and I was there in the green room getting ready to come out and speak on stage and stuff. And, you know, Deepak shows up, and of course I'm making small talk with him as we're waiting. The guy's like super profound. I don't want to say too much because I already know I'm not a smart guy. But if I start talking, he's gonna figure that out.
You don't want to give it away.
Right? Like, I don't want to look like an idiot in front of him. So I started talking with him, and I can't remember exactly how the conversation got to this way, but we're talking about the idea of giving and receiving freely. How does that flow really work? And I remember he picked up a Sharpie marker and he put it in his hand and he said, if I climb a ladder, right, and I put my hand around this, I'm holding it tight, right? And he says, if you look at the Sharpie in my hand, he goes, I'm holding onto it so tight that if someone wanted to give me another gift, there's no way I can receive it. But he says, if I hold it and let it be there freely and I'm willing to share it, I'm willing to give it, I'm willing to lend it, I'm willing to even let it go. He says, if it disappears, that's fine. The universe is ready to give me something else because my hand is out. And I think that that's something that has really been a powerful lesson to me, that if I'm gifted with something, whether it's a talent, and I don't know, maybe I'm not as talented as an actor as I like to think I am, or if I've been given these ideas for these movies that can help other people or whatever, fill in the blank, whatever I'm given as a gift, if I hang on to it too selfishly, well, I'll be the only person that ever benefits from that. And it really doesn't go too far. But if I'm willing to share it, of course, I'm not looking to force it upon people who don't want to hear it. Like, I'm not going to say, here, take my pen, right? Like, I'm not going to do that. But if I just say, I've got a tool, and if it's helpful to you, please use it. Help yourself. Then it allows me to receive more, and also to see a perspective on how that gift can help in other ways. Like, again, my life is different than everyone else's life.
That's right.
Right. And so if I share that tool now and I see how it works in someone else's life, that becomes an aha for me, because maybe they use the tool that I had in a way that I didn't think of, but I should. Right. I give that tool away to someone else and they use it to bless their family life. And I'm like, oh, wow, I can do that too. Then suddenly the gift returns to me with more power than I let it go.
I love that. And that's so true. You know, and how much better would all of us be if we all lived like that? You know, if we didn't try to hold everything just to benefit ourselves and maybe the people that we're closest to. You know, if we shared everything with everybody, how much better would things be?
But here's something interesting. Now we'll go into the movie part of things, with me always playing a villain. The reality is most people think they're already doing that. Even Darth Vader, his mission wasn't to hurt anybody. It's to restore order to the galaxy. Right. And we can do this as father and son. So I believe that everybody wants to make something better than how they found it, even in their own weird way. Right. But I think maybe the difference between a good guy and a bad guy, and I might be wrong, like obviously add some comment at the bottom, what you think are the virtues, if you will, that makes a good guy good, and the terrible things that makes a bad guy bad. I'd be curious to see that, and I'll use that as research. So take a minute right now and think that through, write some answers. But I kind of think that one of the big things is the good guy doesn't really care if you use the advice or not. He gives it freely, but he's not going to compel you to take it, and he's not going to be disappointed if you take it or don't take it. He's going to be neutral. He's just going to say, this is what I found. If it can benefit you, you're welcome to it. But if not, no problem. Right? Right. And I think that's a really big difference, because I think when a bad guy has something that's really good, he's going to pull his gun. He's going to say, okay, you pick that up right now and you do what you're told. Right? So he thinks his idea is the best, and he's going to force you by compulsion to do something with it. Whereas the good guy,
he's thinking that, hey, I'm doing this for your own good.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, because that's true. Because most of the time, especially when you have like a really recognizable villain, in their mind, they're not a villain.
Right.
They're doing whatever they're doing is for the benefit of everybody. It's
so I better say one other caveat too, because I think this is important. The reality is I think there is a time that you do need to step in and let's call it intervention with people. And sometimes that is out of love. And I look at, my parents and stuff. When I was a teenager, there were certain times I said, you cannot hang out with those kids.
Right.
And I, at the time, may think, you're a villain. You're trying to tell me what I can and cannot do. But looking back, I'm grateful for that. And I think that that's also something, too, that a hero has versus the villain is they have the wisdom to know when it's time to build and defend a boundary, right?
Yeah.
There's things that we cannot let slide. And again, I don't want to turn this into a political discussion. I mean, heaven knows we've got so many issues that the world is faced with, everything from gender to, women and men's sports, to protesting in the streets. I mean, pick your pick. There's so many of these things. But there comes a time when you need to defend what is right, a boundary that needs to be protected, regardless of the opinion of the minority or other people that are behind it. There comes a time when doing the right things can mean pissing people off.
That's right.
Right? Now, I'll let you guys as viewers go ahead and send me as much hate mail as you want. I'll even post my post box for you to get it to me, because I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. I'm always interested to have this discussion. But I also want those that are darn pissed off right now to ask, why are you pissed off? Are you pissed off because you're the villain and you're trying to make me believe like you believe?
Right.
Or are you calm enough to say, you know what, maybe it's worth listening to a second opinion on this, and it's okay if I'm wrong, right? Like I'm going to tell you that there's always, what do we say when it comes to money, okay? And this is what we say in the wealth program. There are a million ways to make $1 million.
That's right.
And they're not necessarily one better than the other. There can be a variety of circumstances that dictate will be what is right for the moment.
Yeah.
But there are also some things that are, let's call them eternally true. And when we get on this idea of what is right and what is wrong, there are some things that are non-negotiables, regardless of how many people believe one way or the other.
Right. And
heaven knows, even in the history of human race, we have together collectively as humans picked the wrong answer as a group before. We've done it. In fact, I think we do it more often than we will ever admit.
Yeah.
Right? But there is one answer that is always right. And maybe this is to wrap this little idea up. I'm going to say the one answer that is always right, that is never wrong, is kindness. So if there's someone that disagrees with you, or someone that doesn't maybe get what you understand, and I don't care what side of the fence you think they're on or that you're on, you can never go wrong with just kindly either listening or kindly letting it go. You don't have to always enforce a point. You know, what's funny is I had, this reminds me, when I was in college, I did a religion and philosophy class. And it was wonderful. The teacher was amazing. I still love the guy to death to this day. He's passed, but I still use stuff that he taught me. And I'll never forget, in this class, sometimes you get these students who'd bring up these really weird, crazy ideas out in the middle of nowhere, or interpretations of different holy books, including the Bible and the Quran. And they'd share these really weird ideas. And me listening, I'm like, that's pretty messed up. But I would never say that.
Right.
But I listened to what that teacher said. And do you know what he would always say? He would always go, oh, that's very interesting. He wouldn't acknowledge it. He wouldn't deny it. He would just say, that's very interesting. And then he would move on to something else.
You know, that's actually pretty funny, because I do that.
Right.
Because I'm like everybody else. I've got opinions about stuff, but I try my best to always listen to someone else's opinion, even if I don't agree with it. But I use that trick. You know, I may not say those exact words, but I do. I mean, like, I'll use, she won't mind, so I'll use my mother. You know, sometimes my mother can be a little negative, but because she's concerned. You know, she wants the best for you. So sometimes she can be a little negative, and I may not agree with her, but instead of just arguing with her about that point, I'll say, that's interesting, Mom. Maybe you're right.
Right.
And then
I think your sincerity in there is also a key.
That's
your sincerity is a key. It's not like you're just saying, that's interesting, and dismissing
well,
them.
that's right.
That.
Because I'll go later and think about what she said. I'll be like, well, let me think about it for a little bit. And I may not change my opinion, but I at least can give it consideration and respect who it was coming from.
It's a true listening. Actually, do you know what's interesting here too? I'll just share you this too. I found this when I was doing the interviews with those 400 self-made millionaires. Now, before sharing this answer, let me share what we often hear. So if you follow personal development in any degree, you will have already heard somebody say you have to eliminate the toxic people in your life, the people that, you know, are negative and have all these mean things to say and all this. And you know what? I found that's actually not the truth.
Yeah.
The reality is these self-made millionaires, they do not run from problems. So if somebody comes up and they're negative and they've got things to say, they don't run from that.
Yeah.
Instead, they know how to manage those kinds of people and those kind of emotions and those thoughts. So they can, to some extent, validate that person, not saying that the idea is correct, but the person, right?
Right.
So I understand you feel that way.
Yes.
I then choose, right? I then choose, I can either like, subscribe, or just say nothing.
I mean, don't you think if you eliminate every negative opinion,
right,
aren't you limiting yourself? I mean, aren't you
100% you are? Because let's be honest. Yeah, and let's be honest. Sometimes the negative shit that you hear is true, and you need to hear it.
That's right.
Like no kidding.
Let me say that my mother is right 99% of the time.
100%, and so was mine. And so was mine. And some of the people she told me to not hang around with, she was 100% correct in that. And that saved me. So let me maybe share it this way. There's two kinds of people in the world. There's what we're going to call critics and complainers. Now, a complainer, they're going to tell you what's wrong with the world. Oh, I hate the sports team, and I hate the weather, and I hate the politics, and I hate this. But you know what? They don't provide solutions when they tell you what they hate. So they're just a complainer. There's no value there, and it doesn't do any good to chime in alongside them.
Right.
But a critic, again, complainers and critics, a critic generally says, I don't like this, but here's what you can do about it. Or here's why I don't like it.
I love that.
And then now you can make a judgment and say, either that makes sense or it doesn't. You take the best, you ditch the rest. But if you are just a complainer, you're wasting air. It doesn't do anybody any good. Right. And so I'll nod my head and I'll say, great, but I'm not giving you too much brain space. Right. But if a person's a critic, it might be worth saying, this is painful to hear, but maybe there's something that's true there that I need to know. Right.
Yeah. If you close yourself off to all that, you know, you may be hurting yourself.
100%. Yeah. In fact, it's really interesting. I can think of a couple times, without getting too specific, in my life where somebody has said something to me and they didn't even intend it to be hurtful.
Right.
But the way that it was said, obviously I knew it was true, and so it did hurt. But the more that I reflected on it, wow, it made a change in behavior, or it had me rethink my approach or whatever. And, you know, at times it made a better version of me. And at times it even made me money, which is funny. Right? Yeah.
Well, that's a nice bonus.
Well, it's a nice bonus. But this is it. If we're closed off to every time we feel icky or challenged about something, we're going to eventually leave a lot of gifts on the table.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah.
So this one, though, The Science of Getting Rich is the film, the documentary. You know, when and where can we check this one out?
Well, you know what? We're going to do something special for your listeners. Just because we're friends. The reality is you can find it right now at www.thescienceofgettingrich.movie.com. But what we're doing for your people is if they'd like to go and see the movie, we're going to give them a bunch of free gifts to implement the training in the movie. So, for example, when you see the movie, you're not just going to get a movie experience. You know, you go to the theater and you see a movie or you watch it online. They don't really do much for you other than just, très bien, thank you, you watched our movie. But in this case, what we're going to do when you come and get the movie right now and watch it, we're actually going to give you a workbook that will help you identify certain strategies inside the film and how you can apply them in your own personal life. We're also going to give you a quote book of all the high level thinking and high quotes that Wallace D. Wattles shared in the movie. So you can find that wisdom immediately, like point blank. There it is. We're also going to give you a copy of the book, The Science of Getting Rich, with a really powerful foreword that's written that will help you see some things in the book that you haven't seen. And then there's also a few other little goodies in there. And I'm also going to share a video introduction on that Millionaire Mind Stretch program that I spoke about. And all those things, by the way, are free. All you have to do is go watch the movie and we'll give you all of those things free. I think it's like something like $200-300 of value that we're just going to give you a free for just coming and watching the movie.
In the movie.
Come see the movie.
Yeah, even if you think there's no way that this can help me, why wouldn't you go see it? Because who knows?
Here's the thing that's interesting is 99% of the people out there, well, maybe 98, but 99, I'm going to say for the sake of nice, easy numbers, believe that they've got everything that they already need.
Right.
Right. And that, you know, I don't need any more information or help or support or whatever. But it's interesting that if you look at your life, every time you've made an exponential climb, like up, like the day you learned how to walk, exponential. Now I've got something that opens freedom for me. Day I learned to ride a bicycle, exponential. Now I can go. The day you got a driver's license, exponential. There's times in your life where you're exposed to specific lessons that will open doors that would have been forever closed to you otherwise. I'm going to share that well, let me put it this way. This may or may not be an opportunity like that. If it isn't, no problem. You've watched the movie and you've enjoyed it. You've got some free bonuses on us. That's great. That's the worst that could happen. But if it is a moment that opens up things you've never seen before, considerations you've never had about you, about your life, about your finances, about the way you do things and look at things, if it does open the door, will it not have been worth it to take an hour to 2 hours of your time to watch a movie and ask yourself a couple questions? Am I happy with how things are going on in my life right now? Is there something I could do different? Could I have even 10% better than what I'm experiencing in my life right now? In fact, let's do that for a second. I don't know how much you make or whoever's listening makes.
Sure.
But you picture what that image is, whatever that dollar figure is for a year. If I told you right now, even a 10% improvement from watching a movie, just 10%, would you take an hour and watch a movie that would give you that extra benefit? And for some people, 10% is going to be a very small number. Some people will leave that and it will do a complete 180 in their life. And they'll have a brand new perspective of everything, right? And here's the other thing too, like good books, things like the Bible or other religious texts, you know what? Every time you revisit them, you seem to get something more.
Right.
So this is the kind of movie already, and people have told me this with our other personal development movies. In fact, it's funny. I received a letter one time from a family that told me that they had watched my first movie, The Opus. And now we're coming on the 10-year, or I guess 15-year anniversary now, but 10 years for them when they discovered it. Yeah. And they said that we watched the movie pretty much 4 times a year. Just to give us that recharge, a revisit. And they said every time we watch it, we discover something new. Whoa. Right? Yeah, actually, here, I'll tell you one really cool story. This one still touches me quite a bit. I've told it on other occasions. So when we did a premiere of the movie once, we were in Belgium. And I don't want to be too specific because I don't want to embarrass this person. But I had this man and his son come up to me.
Okay.
And I'd never met them before. I didn't know them. And the young man was probably in his mid-30s. And the father, I don't know, let's call him 50-something. And the son spoke first. He said, he didn't say, hi, my name is so-and-so. He said, you saved my life. And I was like, okay. Like, what does that mean? Like, okay. And he said, no, I'm serious. You saved my life. And then I could tell that there was more to this. So I paused for a minute and said, please tell me. And he said, and then the dad kind of spoke and he spoke and they traded kind of through this conversation to paint this story. What had happened is the mother in this family had died and left the son and the dad together. And it was a really difficult time for them because, you know, I mean, they just lost their mom and wife.
Right.
And the husband kind of went inward and spent his time on his own in one room. And the son kind of went and did his own thing in another room. And they didn't know how to come together and talk about this. And slowly but surely, the son started kind of drifting onto video games and stuff. And then at school, started meeting a crowd that had some drugs going on.
Yeah.
And he met a girl. And he didn't know this at the time, but he got her pregnant. And then kept doing drugs and things were just going terrible. Now, I'll switch for a minute over to the father. The father took a different path. At work, someone introduced him to some really good books and materials in the personal development space, similar to what we've got for the movie, right? And he started getting excited and seeing that I guess I can change my thinking. I can change my life. I've been through a tragic situation, but I can grow from this. and my wife would be proud of who I would become, and I'm going to do this for her. So he became really powerful in his own right. Now, as you can imagine, this boy who's going down the different path, the father started coming home and sharing, here, listen to this CD. This is a motivational thing. It'll get you on track. And the son basically was like,
right.
right? He did not want anything to do with it. And so the father kept trying this and trying this and trying this. Well, the son decided one day, I've had enough of this crap. Says, this dad keeps giving me all these CDs and these dumb books and these videos and things to watch. He said, I think I'm going to kill myself, and I'm going to do it while listening to one of these audio CDs that says, be all you can be. So he found this CD, and it's funny because I used to have bleached blonde hair. And the guy told me when he was telling me the story, he says, I took the CD with the guy that looked like he should be the lead singer of a boy band. That was how I looked. So I'm embarrassed, but I don't say anything. And he says, I'm going to blow my head off to this guy's smug face. And he put the CD into the CD player at the time. He put the headphones on, hit play, and picked up a gun and started spinning the chamber and then put it into his mouth. Now, the interesting thing is he listened to me for a minute just to hear what I had to say. And I always found this was funny. He says, you said something funny and I laughed. And the aimer on the top of the gun got the roof of my mouth and was like, bastard. And he felt bad about it, right? So I thought that was funny. So anyways, then he put the gun back in and kept listening. He says, and then I said something else kind of funny and made him laugh. So the gun kind of came out of his mouth for a minute. He started thinking, and he said, then I said something insightful that he felt like he needed to write it down. Now, this is the interesting thing. I don't know about you, but if I'm about to kill myself, I don't care to write anything down. Right? But he says, I needed to write it down. So I took the gun, I put it down, and I wrote what you said. Then I picked the gun back up, but then you said something else, and I had to write that down too. And soon the gun was just sitting beside me, and I was just writing and taking notes and listening to what you had to say. He says, when I got to the end of that CD, I went and I got another one. And the way he described it, he says, the guy, you know, with the big teeth, Tony Robbins, right? That's how he described it. And he took that CD and he put that one in and he listened to that one next. And then he listened to more and more. And then this is where it gets really cool. He says, I kept listening to them until the end of the day, my dad came home and I heard him come in. I put the headphones down and I came down and I said, Dad, you need to take me to rehab. I need help. And so the father took his son to rehab, put him in there. This is where it gets really cool, okay? Get this, it gets cool. He said, while I was at rehab, they gave me an exercise to write a letter first to my mom. I could express anger, I could share forgiveness, I could say whatever I needed that she was gone. I needed to tell her how I felt. So I did that. And then he said, now they asked me to write another letter, maybe to my dad. Well, I wrote a letter to my dad, even telling him I stole money out of his wallet to buy my drugs and all these things that I done. And I sent that to him. Then he said, anybody else to want to write a letter to? And the kid said, you know what? There was a girl that I was madly in love with. I made a mistake. She's had my baby. I don't even know if it's a boy or a girl. I don't even know if the baby's born yet. I don't know. But I'm going to write her a letter. And as he wrote the letter, he felt in his pocket and realized he had a little bit of money. I think it was somewhere around $40. And he said, I'm going to put it in there. Maybe it helps her. Licked the stamp, sent it off. Anyways, a couple weeks later, he got a letter back. Well, obviously his dad, had been there. But this girl wrote a letter and said, you know what? I've always loved you too. I loved you before your mother died. I've always loved you, even when we were kids in school from like the first grade. Wow. You've been my crush, my sweetheart. And when your mother died, my heart broke for you too. And she says, and then when I saw you go into the drugs, I thought that maybe I could help you and rescue you when I came. And yes, we got pregnant and you told me to go away. But I've been praying every night that I was pregnant, that one day maybe things would go good for you. Because I know that this wasn't your fault entirely, that your mother died and the sorrow you've been on. She said, when I got your letter, it was an answer to prayers. And out fell a picture. And it said, I want you to meet your daughter. And if you're open to it, we'd like to come and see you. And so he wrote back, yes. And this girl started coming every single weekend with the daughter. And they reconnected. And she saw that he was getting help. And he saw that he was truly loved. And of course, a little baby girl that he got to hold on his knee that was his, and he was responsible for that girl. Well, needless to say, when we go back to that time when I was talking to these two guys, they had me in tears.
Well, it's got me in tears right now, and I can tell you're emotional telling the story.
And so the guy said to me, he goes, "We have something to ask you. Again, you saved my life, but we have something to ask you." And the father kind of looked at him and he said, "Go ahead, ask him." He said, "Would you be the best man at my wedding?"
Oh my gosh.
"Because I'm going to marry this girl and you've changed our lives." Now, there's other things that have happened since then, and I've kept in touch with this family, and things are going great now, or better. But the thing that I think is interesting about this all, if we're going back to a movie like The Science of Getting Rich, or any of the other projects I've been so blessed to be part of, they're not really about me at all, right? They have nothing to do really with me. I'm just sharing what I've learned. But I can never ever calculate the difference it will make. There's possibly someone who's watching your show right now, hopefully not, that's in the difficult situation that these two guys were in. But there is somebody that's hurting. There's somebody that maybe they don't know how they're going to make their ends meet. Maybe their finances are in real trouble and they don't know where they're going. Maybe they're like me and they were about to lose their house or vehicles or whatever. Maybe their relationships are falling apart and they don't know how to rein it back in and rescue that. Maybe they've got the drug problem. Maybe, like, you could just list whatever problem it is. And if you're watching and you've got one of those problems, you don't need me to mention it by name. You already know in your heart that you need some help. And I'm here to tell you that films like this can make a difference. That you might just discover that one thing that you need that's going to put everything into proper perspective for you. You're going to see it in a different way. It's going to change things. And that trajectory of where you're going that you don't like, that you're afraid of and you know won't do you any good, this could be the moment where you realize that this is a new path. And it will take you to somewhere that you never expected, but you're grateful for. And it introduces you to a better and best version of you that you never, ever saw or knew existed. And years from now, of course, you may forget me, you may forget the movie, but the lesson that you gained there has eternally changed you. And of course, I think the thing that's interesting, going back to the story of this dad and the kid, they've changed and touched a lot of people. Like, their story has changed and touched a lot of people. Now, again, I was part of that journey. To what degree, who's to argue that? But what he's done with that since then is all on him. Has nothing to do with me.
Right.
And so your story is about to come, whatever it's going to be, and you can decide what it will be. And I do hope you will come and see the movie. But what I hope more is that the movie doesn't go into you. It goes through you and creates something bigger. It's like, how should we say, the sunshine that waters the tree. You were already great before you saw the movie, right? In fact, one of my friends has a really cool quote, and maybe I'll end with this for you. He says, "You're not as good as you think you are. You're better." And I think that is something that we often forget, right? We are so much more powerful than we ever give ourselves credit for.
Right.
And most of us are satisfied to play small. Most of us are content to look at that competition and excuse ourselves from our own greatness because it's just easier.
It's just hard. It's too hard to do.
Yeah, right? So my question really with all of this is just, what will you do next? Because that's where change happens.
I think that's a terrific place to end on, Doug. You've got me all emotional. I'm going to go home. My wife's going to be like, "What's the matter with you?" Now, thank you so much, Doug, because every time you come on here, I learn something, and I always have such a terrific time. So I can't wait to see what the next one's going to be about. But love this, and good for you for out there, paying it forward, because that's what it's all about.
True.
If we all just try to help each other a little bit, who knows what that can lead to?
100%. Yeah, 100%. We need each other. We all need each other.
We do. Absolutely.
Right.
Well, Doug, thank you so much. I hope we can do it again soon.
We will.
Before I let you go, you one more time, run through where they can find the Science of Getting Rich, and then go through your own social media too.
Yeah, so the Science of Getting Rich can be found simply at the website www.thescienceofgettingrich.movie.com. So you have to add the word movie in there. And then my social media, I'm everywhere. I think Instagram is the easiest to find me, but I'm now on TikTok and Facebook and all of those regular places. And it's just my name. But if you're going to follow me, just make sure you don't click follow and do nothing about it. Say hi. And if the stuff that we've talked about today has helped you, or if you've got questions about it and you'd like to learn more, let me know. I mean, I learned from this too when I talk about it, right? So I'm excited to share this journey with people.
Well, thank you so much, Doug. And definitely, let's do it again. That'll be number 5.
I love it. It'll be perfect. It'll be perfect.
All right, hold on one second. I'm such a fan of Douglas. He is the best. Listen, he kind of went through a few things where he's kind of downplaying his acting. He's an outstanding actor, outstanding stunt person. I mean, he's fearless, or he hides the fear very well. But acting wise, he is terrific. And now I'm starting to suspect that motivational speaker might be his most talented role. Talented guy. Absolutely love Douglas Vermeeren. Terrific. Please do normally I tell you, do whoever a favor and go check out their project. Well, this time I'm going to tell you, do yourself a favor. Go watch The Science of Getting Rich. Doug does this stuff out of the goodness of his heart, and you can get some free, helpful stuff just by watching the movie. Go check it out, The Science of Getting Rich. You will not be disappointed. Thank you guys for tuning in with us. Really appreciate you being here. Our YouTube channel is MeisterCon Pod. Please subscribe. We really need those subscriptions. They're free. Really helps us out. Our website is meistercon.com. You can find almost 900 episodes, audio and video on there. And it'll tell you if we're doing anything in studio, if we're going on location, covering a convention, anything we have going on will be on the website, meistercon.com. So please check us out there as well. Till next time. Bye, everybody.